Hey everybody, it's Michelle and this is Queer Hustle and I am here today with Andy Schumacher from Little Shoe Studios. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself to the crew?
Hi everyone, my name is Andy Schumacher with Little Shoe Studios. I am the founder and CEO of Little Shoe Studios, as well as a board member of the nonprofit called the Queer Business Alliance. And I'm so happy to be here today, talk a little bit more about my entrepreneurial journey and what business has looked like for me as a queer person.
Living and breathing queer business. We love that. We love you. And what's interesting about you is you started really early. You started when you were 22.
I
What
did.
led you to do that crazy thing?
Yeah, I have a very interesting kind of starting off point because I never set out to start a business. I actually had full intentions of becoming a Hollywood style film editor or director, like somewhere in that production space. And so, right out of college, I went to the University of Iowa. I'm from Chicago originally, popped over to Iowa for college, returned home to Chicago right after, and Googled film internships in Chicago and was just looking for anything to get my feet in the door. And what I found was an unpaid internship where I learned a bunch and really developed a lot of my artistic skills, but was not valued, especially monetarily with the unpaid element. But even once I completed my unpaid hours, I still didn't feel valued. And I would get in arguments with the owners of the company, not just myself, others in my situation where we would agree on a certain amount for a project. And then when the payday came, it would be less than we talked about. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like collaboration. So we got into a wonderful argument one sunny afternoon in Chicago where I couldn't pay my rent that month because of this miscommunication or not getting the correct amount on the paycheck. And I told him, I was like, look, I can't pay my rent, and that's a problem. And he looked at me and he said, it's not my job to care about your rent. So I said, fuck you, got in my car and drove away. And that's how I started my business. I had no intentions of doing so, but I suddenly was on the road saying, oh goodness, I don't have a job now. What am I going to do for money? So I started off as like this freelance film editor, utilizing those skills that I had learned. But the more and more I got into it, I met up with a photographer friend and then a graphic designer friend and a website designer. And it started making more and more sense to me that my true storytelling medium is business. It was never film. It was never what I thought it was going to be. It was creating business, doing what I love, and then showing the world that that's possible.
I love this story so much. And especially because you just took it and you said, okay, I'll be responsible for my own rent. No house then.
Exactly.
I'll go do
Exactly.
that.
What if I could be in his shoes? And what if I could create a team and collaborate with individuals and tell them that they are valued and that they deserve money for it? Like, not just their beautiful artistic ideas, but they deserve to be valued for being creative, and they deserve to have not only their rent covered, but they should thrive. Survival is no longer what's acceptable.
Absolutely. And by the way, one of my major motivations for starting business too is just wanting to be a good boss and wanting to create opportunities that I didn't always have. And it's not like I never had a good boss. I had good bosses, I had bad bosses, I had mediocre
Yeah.
bosses, but it really started to get a sense of here's the culture that I want to create, not only paying
Yeah.
people well, making sure everybody has benefits, but also like a place where it's okay to cry because I like to cry all the time. And like I felt embarrassed at other jobs when I did that. And like in my office, it's totally cool to cry and it is not considered unprofessional. It's like just being able to create your own culture in a place that feels safe for you and others is such a rewarding part of being an entrepreneur. So I love that as a motivation.
Absolutely. And I love speaking with you because I know we're totally on the same page with all of that and elevating the queers in business and everything on that page.
Well, absolutely. One of my primary motivations for wanting to help queer business owners scale was exactly what you talked about. We are not always given the opportunities that we, deserve without, and when I say deserve, that's not about entitlement. That's about requisite with our experience and requisite with the value that we provide. And we've talked about this on the show before, but sometimes it can be very disconcerting when you're getting discriminated against because you don't know for sure that that's what's happening. And this is something that it gets very nuanced. But we talk, and this is gender, this is race, this is sexuality, this is gender identity, this is all of these things. Is it because of is it because I'm queer? Is it because I'm gender fluid? Is it because you think I'm a woman? Like, or is it because I'm black if you're black? Like what,
Yes,
or
exactly.
not, because it's very rare that somebody is going to explicitly say, I'm discriminating against you for the following reason.
Right. Nobody calls themselves out. And
Right.
I've had experiences even where I've felt that. And I have the same experience where I'm like, what is it? Is it because I'm young? Is it because I'm queer? Is it because I'm a female or female presenting or what you perceive as a female? And I've called people out on it, past clients and connections. And normally the immediate response is, oh, I'm not being biased. I'm not being prejudiced. Like they're never going to admit it. You just have to kind of deal with it on your own and learn how to deal with those situations.
There's always the plausible deniability, and that's what makes it so insidious. So you're just perceiving that that is happening. It's almost like gaslighting at a time. And you go, wait a second, you start to believe that for a while, and then after a few years go by, you go, wait, I'm seeing all these other people with the same qualifications or less,
Yes.
get moved higher, and I don't think I'm crazy. And so, part of what my whole mission has been to just help queer people go out and get for themselves what nobody else is giving us. And that's, the title, the pay, the respect, and the expertise, the opportunities to get more expertise and all of those things. And then to turn around and create better jobs, safer environments with the money that we make.
Absolutely. It's the community has to fuel itself almost. It's this cycle. Like as we're building up, we're going to give back to each other and we're just going to get stronger and stronger. Like I just believe so strongly in this. We need to elevate the entire social capital of the queer community and work together to make that happen because collaboration and community is the only way.
Right. We've got to build, in some ways, the extreme version is like building our own economy. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to ever interact with anybody else. But if we're going to get passed over for opportunities, we're going to create our own opportunities, and then we're going to create opportunities for each other. And we're going to build it. We're going to have our own club. We can have our own club. We're not in your club. That's fine. We'll have our own club.
That's so true. You were asking me before we started recording about what does queer have to do with business and being queer, and does it affect business and all of that? And for me, that is it exactly. It's that the systems were never built for us. They were never built with us in mind. You can go study business, you can get an MBA, you can do everything that is in the world to learn how to be a business owner. But so few times is it coming from a queer perspective. So few times are they taking into account all of the different challenges that you might face as a queer person. And if we're not having these mentors or people in these spaces of leadership and visibility, we're just self-perpetuating this idea that it doesn't happen. But we're here, it's happening, and we're building our own systems. We're going to make our own world. We're going to make our own business model. We're going to make our own business system. And a big piece of that is saying that competition is no longer this the system that we grew up with or that we were instilled to believe in. There's enough for all of us, and we're all enough, and we can work together to collectively elevate ourselves.
Absolutely. When you talked about business school, I was just calling back to some of my experiences at business school and some of the things that it's not even overtly discriminatory. There's just things that happen. So I went to Tuck at Dartmouth, which I love. I bleed green. Like I love Tuck. I can't say enough good things about Tuck. But Tuck is in Hanover, New Hampshire, which is a very tiny little town, very remote. It's not really, as much as they would love to attract lots of queer people, and they really are trying to attract a diverse student body, queer people, people of color, it's not exactly wanting to run to rural New Hampshire, where it's hard to find our own communities, people like us. And that's the kind of thing that it's a complex problem. They can't move themselves out of Hanover, New Hampshire. And so it's how do you start to attract people and say, oh no, it's cool and it's friendly here. And you go, well, I came and there was nobody else like me. And that's because we can't get anyone else to come to Hanover. Or I would go, literally Dartmouth was an all male school for so long, centuries before they let women in. And so they're like the men's bathrooms are everywhere and the women's bathrooms were kind of like off to like afterthoughts in the building. It was like you had to go and find the women. It was super weird. And it was like, well, this was just not built with anybody else. Nobody else was here until 1970 or whatever. And this building is old. So this is what it is. And it's that kind of shit that it's like we have to be very deliberate about speaking up about how this affects us, and then how can we change it. And then you don't want to be the one that's loud about it. You don't want to be like, I have to walk 500 more feet to the bathroom. So could somebody do something? Like, you don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
It never gets changed, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And I was actually watching this TED Talk recently about like being the second follower. Like there's the leader who starts and has this wild idea, and how important that next person that comes in and says, "Yes, I agree with you and I'm also willing to go out on a limb with this." And that's what I kind of feel like is happening in the queer community right now, especially in the entrepreneur and business space, where a couple really brave souls started popping up and saying, "Hey, we actually are here, we are totally capable of this and we're having success." And now it's just like an avalanche. It's just a huge snowball effect that is growing and growing, and that's amazing.
Absolutely. QueerHustle is growing super fast, and we are hoping to get back to a point soon where we can do conferences and be in person. And but it's just you start speaking up, and then other people are like, oh, me too, me too, me too. I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know there was a group of us, and now we get that snowball effect, and I love it. I do
Mhm.
want to ask you, because our communities tend to intersect with progressive type of activist communities. A lot of
Yeah.
folks in those communities are feeling very, there's a lot of anti-capitalist sentiment
Mm,
going on.
mhm.
How do you wrestle with being pro-business and pro-queer at the same time?
That's a really good question. And exactly like you said, it's a bit of a wrestle. Like I think about this a lot, and whenever I do participate in these capitalist systems, I always make sure that I'm asking myself, like, can I observe this as almost like a detached perspective, even? Um, can I like examine and collect data about what this experience is like without being so emotionally invested in it? At the same time, we live in a world where it kind of runs on money right now. So we kind of have to participate to a certain extent in order to change it. So I find myself working with Little Shoe Studios. We do websites, branding, and content like photos and videos. And I love working with businesses who are creating positive change in the world, who are doing phenomenal things, and trying to basically recreate what capitalism means. Queering capitalism, I like that phrase because queering can mean to question and to examine and observe and like really think about. So when we're queering capitalism, it's not necessarily that we're saying we agree with it or we disagree with it. It's saying we're we're going to re-examine these systems. We're going to create new ones that fit us better, and we're going to make our own new thing, right? Capitalism might even not be a word anymore because what we're going to create hasn't even existed before.
Right. And I love queer people leading the charge on this. I think, we're used to thinking outside binary, and we've got this binary right now. Oh, it's either capitalist or it's socialist. It's capitalist or it's communist. And are you a
Yeah.
communist? Are you a capitalist? And it's like, well, there's something in between where we can do this better. We are in the system that we're in. And I kind of feel the same way you do in terms of like, I'd like to it's somewhat work within the system we're in and make it better, especially as somebody that sits at a place of relative privilege in our community,
Yeah.
and has entree and access to places and things and people that not everybody in our community does. Can I be a bridge? Can I start to say, okay,
Mhm.
let me push the door open and then say, come on, come
Yes,
on, everybody.
exactly.
It's fine. And there's money for us, and there's business for us, and we can do
Yeah.
this too. And we can do this in a different way without oppressing anybody else.
Mhm. And the reality of it is that somebody out there is doing it anyways and getting that money right now. So we can step away from it and not get it, or we can acquire the money and use it as a tool to accomplish our missions. So that just makes so much more sense to me. And I'm very fortunate that, like you said, I have this privilege that has allowed me to be 22 years old and start a business. And I've had it always kind of had an innate sense of bravery and courage that I've always just kind of been like, I am who I am. And, the world, not that it can just deal with it, because I've always been working on myself and constantly exploring personal growth, but I'm not going to let the world tell me who I should and shouldn't be. So I'm just so fortunate for the situations that I grew up in, how my life has played out to allow me the opportunity to do so. And I'm so excited for the future to get more and more people in the same boat.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that attitude. It's such an entrepreneurial attitude. It's such a queer attitude. It's such an entrepreneurial attitude. Look, I am who I am. This is what we're doing. Get on the train or get off.
Yeah.
And so that's such an asset because
Mhm.
you are pushing through not just the societal stuff that we're talking about, but also just being an entrepreneur, period, is fucking hard.
It's hard. It's hard. And a young entrepreneur, I mean, I barely knew how to be an adult, let alone run a business and be an adult at the same time. So when something went wrong in my personal life or anything really, like I didn't know how to handle that across all these different spectrums. And I've gotten so many wonderful things and lessons from starting as a young entrepreneur. And I can also think of so many things I would have loved to have if I started later. So much more experience, resources, tools, things like that, that would have been wonderful to have when I was younger. But the truth of it is that everyone has their own path, and mine kind of shoved me out onto it early, which was worked for me.
It's working out.
Yeah.
It's good. You know, I'm going to call back to something you said earlier, which is like somebody's going to get this money anyway. And one of the things that I see with my clients when they first come into me, or even prospective clients, when I'm talking to them, it breaks my heart, is lots of queer people just not getting paid enough. And a lot of times they're feeling guilty. They're feeling like, well, I want to make sure I'm accessible to everybody, that everyone can afford what I do. And I can't charge this much. And it's like they're just buying into this narrative that wasn't perpetuated by other queer people, I don't think, you know, and they're buying into it and they're saying, well, I can never charge this. And so we were working with them to try to say, oh yeah, you can charge this kind of money to these kind of people. And then when you make enough money, you can take your Fridays to do pro bono work or whatever. But like, you know, get your
Yeah.
oxygen mask on, get your business growing, and then do your charitable stuff. But if you're trying to mix charity and business into one service line, that's when we get stuck and saying, well, I can't ever charge
Totally.
$20 for a website, you know, and you're like, oh my
Right.
God, please do, right? Please do, because somebody
Right.
else is charging $100,000 for the same fucking website.
Exactly. And this, you're completely right that this is unique to, I think, our community, or at least marginalized communities in general, where we say this to ourselves over and over again, and then we end up self-perpetuating it because we're doing a disservice to each other when we do that. I actually had a therapist before I moved out of Chicago, and I was working with her on so much, you know, as therapists do. But one of them was knowing my worth and how much to charge. And she used an example for me. She used the example of a yoga teacher because that's what her partner was. But she said, if the yoga teacher doesn't charge what they're worth, let's say it's $20 for a class, just as a number, and instead they're charging $5. So not only do all the people look at this $5 class and say, oh, well, I can get it for cheaper, but now all the other yoga teachers have to say, oh crap, I have to lower my rates to $5 to be competitive. So instead, you have this large group of people who all want to be charging $20, suddenly charging $5 for the same thing, when instead that $5 person could have just jumped up to that 20, and it solves the same problem, but with everybody being valued.
Absolutely. Like, this is the one way that I say it that usually gets through to my clients. Is like, you're screwing over other queer people, you're screwing over other women, you're screwing over
Yeah.
other people. When you do this, you are
Mhm.
setting a market rate, and we do not want to be in a race to the bottom on our pricing. We want to price to value every single
Exactly.
time. And that usually gets like, oh God, I never thought about it that way. And then that
Yeah.
gets them, and then they set their prices. Everyone have to set their prices, right? But it's like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God, we have to value ourselves, and we have to value
Absolutely.
each other. And so when people are coming, you know,
Mhm.
I'm a business coach, right? When people come to me and say, oh, do you have a sliding scale, or or can you work for less, or do you have a discount? I'm in a particular industry where facts are facts. Like, if you don't have money to invest in a business, it's going to be hard to grow it. You're going to need to find money to hire people. You're going to need to find money to advertise. You're going to need to find money if you need expert help from somebody like me, if you need a website, if you need, you know, any of these things,
Yep.
you are going to have to invest money. So I'm not doing anybody a favor to say, oh yeah, I'll give you, you know, 10% of my normal rate. Because then they're spending money for nothing, because they're not going to be able to access money to do anything else. And this isn't about having the money in the bank, but it is about being able to have access to borrow, you know, have the risk tolerance to borrow money, have the credit to borrow money. You know, you may have to borrow money and invest it and do it. And we do that all the time. We work with people that are starting from zero all the time and are just taking risks
Yeah.
with bank money and things like that. But if you're not willing to do that now, you're not going to be able to grow a business later. And so it's, you know, it feels shitty to have to say that to somebody, but I'd rather say that to somebody now than take even 10% of what I normally make and then have them find out that they don't have what it takes, or they're not going to be able to do what it takes to actually get the outcome that they want. Right.
Totally. And I mean, having rates and setting prices, a lot of times it's because it's what's necessary to cover your cost of goods, to cover your labor, to cover your time. And I found when I'm not valuing myself and I'm charging under what I think I should be, I end up not producing the best work. I'm
Right.
not myself. I'm not my best self. The team that I hire isn't the best because we're not feeling that value. So if you're going to produce your best and do your best for your client, you have to charge what you're worth. Absolutely, like bottom line.
Right. I mean, I need to be excited to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if I'm showing up in resentment or my staff showing up in resentment, you're not getting
Yeah,
the best quality thing anyway.
exactly. Exactly.
So let's go out and get what we're worth. What do you tell people? Because you must, when you're chairing the Queer Business Alliance, this must come up all the
Yeah.
time. And you must
Uh,
be telling people, oh my God, you're so, do you just tell them if you find out what they're charging and you think it's way too little, or do you just go, oh my God, what are you doing? Or what do you do?
yeah, that's a good question. I have absolutely had that conversation with people before. And it's even a conversation we had when we were deciding about membership for our nonprofit. Like, do we charge? How much do we charge? All of that. And um, ultimately, I just can speak from experience. Like, I lived undercharging and undervaluing myself for so long. And I wasn't happy. My business wasn't doing well. My clients weren't as happy as they are when I am myself and doing better. Um, so if I do come across somebody who's undervaluing themselves, I don't mind telling them and just saying, hey, like, when's the last time you checked out your rates? When's the last time you raised them? Have you considered checking out others in your market? And maybe I know sometimes we tend to get caught up in collecting examples of our work or things that we've done, but we forget to look back and see how much better we've gotten as they've gone. So we just like think that we have to prove ourselves instead of realizing that you've already had this value and this worth within you.
Right. And if somebody's calling you to talk to you about your services, it's because they think you know better than they do, or they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be on the phone with you. If they could do it better, they'd go do it.
Absolutely.
And we sit here and we get in this mentality of, oh, I got to make sure they like me and I've got to dance for them and I've got to make, please
Mm-hmm.
pick me. And it's like, no, they're on the phone because you can do something they can't. So
Yeah.
like, feel confident in that
Yeah.
and go ahead and charge what you're worth. So, and I just, yeah,
Absolutely.
it's so important. I'm glad we're talking about this. It's so important. And it's so important in a
Yeah.
collective.
Absolutely. And, everything shifted for me too when I started kind of turning the tables on that play. So instead of I need to make myself likable to this client, I need to make sure that they want to hire me. I kind of change it and I interview my clients now. And I'm
Yes,
like, is
me
this
too.
a good fit for me?
Yeah,
Is this a client that I want to work with? Is this somebody who's aligned with my business, my mission, my values? And that has changed everything. Even if
absolutely.
I've
By
had
the
to
way,
say
same revelation changed my dating life in my 20s.
no. That's
Instead
the
of do they
best
like
kind
me? Do
of
I
love.
like them? Because that's really important.
Yeah. And
Right.
when you realize this, that, and with entrepreneurship and business as a whole, it is largely applicable to life in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. Your feelings are important. What you want matters. With your business, and you want to enjoy your business and your life. And I tell my clients too all the time, it doesn't matter how much money we make if we're miserable in the
Exactly.
business. I'd personally rather make less money and have a business I love, working with clients I love and staff I love, than just completely sell out and be like, fuck it, I'll make as much money as possible.
Right, right. And
And we're still
ultimately,
making good money. It's not that we're not making money, but it's like, the difference between making a few $1 million a year and making $10 million a year. But I hate my life at 10 million, I'd rather make a few million and be good.
exactly. And once you kind of realize too that like value, worth, money, all of it, it's really just kind of energy. And
Mhm.
it's fluid, really. It's ever flowing and getting fixated on I need to have this much or I don't have this much or I need to discount this much. It puts out an energy. So when you're knowing your value, knowing your worth, charging your value, charging your worth, it puts it out into the universe and it comes back to you too. Like you're able to give that out once you feel more fulfilled and nourished and in a safer place. And then it's a cycle. It just keeps going.
It does. I love how you're putting that in those terms of energy, but it gets easier, it gets better.
Hmm.
As somebody who used to charge too little and now charges appropriately, and we both know from observing other people do this, that counterintuitively, the sale gets easier when you're charging more. You start to come across people who take it seriously, in your case, you know, somebody that wants a website, right? Like if I know that I want a quality website and I want somebody that really knows what they're doing and I have a budget for it and I'm ready to pay, that's a much easier sale than if you're trying to sell a $500 website to somebody who's like, I don't know.
Exactly. You automatically end up establishing yourself as the expert that you've been clawing to establish yourself as for so long. Just by increasing your prices to what you actually need to charge, suddenly people start perceiving you as somebody who deserves that kind of money. It's wild.
Absolutely. Well, and you're talking to a different audience and you're talking to
Mhm.
people who value your time, who understand the investment that they're making, who understand that that they're getting value back for it. You know,
Exactly.
it's just easier to sell a $10,000 thing than a $500 thing.
Exactly.
Everyone's so scared if I raise my prices, no one's going to want to hire me. It's like, well, you must not think very highly of your work if that's how you think about it. So,
Yeah. And I mean, it takes a lot of self work too, because I've been there. I used to not think that highly of my own work. And we're our harshest critics, right? We're so hard on ourselves, always putting pressure on ourselves. And a lot of it changed also when I started talking to myself better and valuing my own creative mind, my own ideas, my work that I produce. And once I started valuing myself, it was easier to put that out there too.
oh, absolutely. And I think that the most important work that I do as an entrepreneur and as a CEO is the navel gazing shit, right? Like the meditation, the mindset work, the therapy, the psychiatry, the coaching. I have coaches too. You know, it seems like, wow, you really spend a lot of time on yourself, optimize. But yeah, because
Mhm.
how I show up makes all the difference in my business. It makes the difference for my clients. It makes the difference for my staff. It makes the difference for my happiness. It makes the difference for my kids. I'm a parent, right? It makes a difference for everybody. So
Yeah.
I will carve that time out and do that work and put money toward that work before I'll do almost anything else at this point, because the value of entrepreneurship really for me is the journey, the personal growth journey.
It is. It is. And when we talk about having an initial investment, if monetarily it might not be there, the best investment you can make is in yourself, personal growth. And there's resources of all kinds, from just going out in nature to books, podcasts, all kinds of things. And if you just surround yourself with that, it's that cycle. It's going to permeate and go further and further.
Absolutely. So, you know, we've got a bunch of people watching this that are just starting out or haven't started yet and maybe want to start a business. What's your best advice to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, this is interesting. Specifically because I don't know, I'd have to fact check all of it, but there's a graphic going around that Elon Musk gave some entrepreneurs advice. And it was, if you need advice, don't be an entrepreneur, or if you need like comforting words or encouraging words or something. And I looked at this quote for a while and I thought about it. And I was finally just like, that's such bullshit.
I feel like I've never heard anything I disagreed with more in my entire life.
Right? Who doesn't need encouraging words? Who doesn't need encouragement? Sounds like a straight white man to me.
And who
uh,
knows if he even fucking said it, but like, I hope
right, like
not, right? Because that's
the
awful.
idea, the idea of it. And so my advice is to find community, support other people, and ask for support, ask for help. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Put yourself out there. Ask for those encouraging words. Tell people you need them, and everyone else can F off. Like, you got to ask for what you need. And by building that community and that support, anything suddenly becomes possible. You're suddenly connected to so much more resources, so much more compassion, so much more love, so much more everything that you would need to be an entrepreneur.
Oh, look, I got trophies behind me. Not a single one of them says, didn't ask for help.
Right?
Ask for the least help in life, right? The
Uh-huh.
more we, you know, when you talk about like manifesting or projecting or the universe brings back to you, you know, and all these medical, really what we're talking about is directing focus, directing energy. And people can't help you if they don't know what you need, if they don't know what you're
Mm-hmm.
working on. And so sometimes it's just the difference between saying, hey, I'm working on this thing I'm really excited about, and I'm looking for
Yeah,
people that XYZ, do you know anybody? And seeing what comes back to you.
absolutely.
Exponential results just from asking your community for help. Absolutely.
Everyone I've met in the queer business community has been more than willing to help, support, connect people, whatever somebody needs. We're constantly asking each other, what can I do for you? How can I help you? What can I do to support you right now? Don't be afraid to ask that of somebody else and to ask for it for yourself.
Absolutely. 100%. Love that advice. Listen, Andy Schumacher, Little Shoe Studios, thank you so much for being here with us today. Very Zen advice. Love it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And we'll talk to the rest of y'all next time. Bye.